Have you ever wondered what exactly led up to the 2009 financial crisis and why didn't the government prevent it in the first place? Many of our families had to live through this devastating economic turmoil without us truly understanding how the financial industry spiraled uncontrollably and caused a massive economic crisis that we now know as the Great Recession of 2009. I still remember when my mom was laid off during the recession. She worked as a broker's assistant for most of her career, a middle class woman that planned on working at her company until retirement. Unfortunately, none of us knew that a small group of people in the financial industry would act irresponsibly to the point of causing millions of people around the world to face economic devastation. It was particularly hard for my mom as me and my siblings were still in high school. We had no idea what was going on in the world at the time. She had to quickly adapt to find a part time job, and only years later did she tell me how hard it was for her to cope with the circumstances at the time. She went from having a middle class stable salary and benefits to being a temp worker in the housekeeping department at a hotel making minimum wage with no benefits. Because she was a temp worker, she would get the night shift coming home at 12 every night, and never once did she tell us how tired or exhausted she was. She had to bottle in all her emotions and continue to push for the sake of her children, and even though any college graduate can imagine the psychological hurdle one would have to go through from working at a corporate job for 20 years to lifting beds and making sheets. Even as hard as it was for my mom, she was one of the lucky ones that could still find a job to feed her kids. Many families around the world lost their homes, and the economic crisis wiped out so many industries that employment was not available even to those that desperately sought it. Now, what exactly happened a decade ago that led to this horrible economic tragedy? Did our government and financial regulators know about it? Could they have prevented it? I think we all know the answer to this question, and the answer is simply yes. The financial sector engaged in reckless and greedy behavior, all while unchecked. The banks gave out mortgages to anyone and everyone, even though they knew many people taking on these no loans and mortgages could not afford it. But in order to make more fees, the bankers continued this irresponsible behavior and continued to exacerbate this behavior following up to the 2009 recession. These bankers saw what was coming and decided to double down on it to make more money before the market crashed. But they not only did they continue to hand out large amounts of mortgages in risky situations, but they also financially engineered and repackaged these as products to be sold. They sliced, chopped, and replaced them and sold them to investors as new and exciting products. The issue was that it wasn't just big investors that were purchasing these ticking time bombs. Pension funds, people that manage middle class workers' 401ks also bought these financial products on behalf of the working Americans. And the reason many of them bought these products was that the bank paid grading companies to label the product as triple A, which was the highest grade for financial products, and it meant that they were safe. This led many people to believe that these financial products were very safe. However, these grading companies were paid by the banks to grade them. So the higher the grade and the more triple A's that these label companies gave out, the more money they made. So of course they would label anything and everything triple A, especially if they were not going to be legally liable if anything went wrong. So when large amounts of people could not afford to pay back the mortgages, they went bankrupt and lost their homes. Then everyone that bought these products lost everything and went bankrupt as well, in addition to the pensions and the 401ks. And then the entire stock market filled with these products collapsed, causing the markets to tumble and a ripple effect throughout the entire world. I mean, now the question may be, where is our government in all of this? Aren't they supposed to have oversight and regulate the massive financial industry? I'm sure we all know the answer to this question. But the key to understanding the system is how entrenched is Wall Street in our political system and in what ways. So, from the 1940s and 1980s, the US government closely regulated the financial sector. But as the financial industry began to consolidate into a small group of massive firms, their power grew. They caused the early 2000 internet bubble. They introduced derivatives to the financial markets in the 90s. And as you can see in this graph, you can see in the 2000s that the S&P 500 markets tumbled in 2000s, which was the dot-com bubble. But if you look at the 2008, it just hit rock bottom. And also part of the reason is that the lobbying power by these massive financial firms continue to pour in, and these massive campaign donations. If you look here, finance, insurance, and real estate, they spent over close to $6 billion lobbying the government from 1998 to 2014. And it's not just lobbying the government. You can see all these lobbying done under presidential presidents. Clinton, Bush, Obama just skyrocketed from the 80s on. Not to mention the top super PACs that are spent constantly to support senators, House of Representatives that support their agendas. Also, because of these connections, the government will appoint former CEOs of major banks or people that have close ties with the massive financial firms to key positions in the administration. For example, this is Larry Summers, who was once the president of Harvard and has close ties with Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers, Merrill Lynch. What's truly laughable is that he was part of the push to deregulate the banking system when he served under the Clinton administration. And after the financial crisis, he became the Treasury Secretary. So a person that deliberately played a part in this whole mess gets an important decision, gets an important position that is supposed to regulate the large banks after the recession. I mean, in addition to all of this, no one went to jail. All the CEOs and executives got to keep the billions of dollars they made by screwing the American people and working class people from all over the world. I mean, and so you have guessed, the government structure has not changed since the recession a decade ago. The financial institutions continue to have more and more power and have actually grown even larger since the recession. All the banks and firms that went bankrupt or that the government took over were sold to even bigger banks like JP Morgan, Citibank, so that now they're even more larger and harder to regulate. This is truly a wake-up call for everyone in the country, and especially for Baruch students to keep in mind. Thank you.